Awesome. We're on.
We're on.
Hello, world. God, that's the worst computer science joke ever. It's not even good. So
nice chicken.
I'm here, so that's helpful. We've got a few people coming in. Some people need some of their caffeine fuel. So I think we'll have a few people join on from other rooms, or they'll walk in. But this is our community stand-up for February. A little bit of a change for people who have seen the past ones. We typically release once a month, and kind of, we would release the first Wednesday or something like that, and then we would always do the community stand-up the following Thursday. We're going to change that around. There's Mark. Hey, Mark.
Hello.
We're changing that around a little bit for a few reasons. So first of all, we are shipping every 2 weeks now, bi-weekly, and it's now lining up on Tuesdays. But there's not always quite enough to fit into an entire community stand-up every 2 weeks. So we're going to stick with the monthly community stand-ups, and we're kind of going to just do the first or second Thursday or Friday that works best for the team. So that's kind of where we're at now. You may have noticed we've had two releases on the 2-week schedule. And feel free to go to GitHub at any time, Azure/Azure-PowerShell, to check out our releases if you want to see the next few upcoming milestones. We've got a lot today because our last release was in early December. Holidays and things like that. We decided to kind of wait until late January for a subsequent release, and then now we're doing our community stand-up that will cover everything since that December release. So it's been 2 releases since then. I believe 131 was the date, and 213 was the date of the next one. So first of all, Sergey isn't here, so I can talk about it, or somebody else can talk about it. We're going to talk about some of the things that have come out recently. First up is new Azure VMSS. I don't have a demo prepared, but if you're interested, we shipped new Azure VM with a simplified convenience parameter set, is what we're calling them, in early December. What I should show off is some of the docs there. That might be a good idea. You guys down for that?
Sure.
Sure. All right. Let's share
we can say kind of what the idea is behind the new Azure VMSS, right?
Yeah. So how about Mark? You continue on with that conversation while I get the screen share ready.
Sounds good. So the whole idea is similar to what we do with new Azure VM, which is to set up a VM scale set. There's really multiple pieces, including like a load balancer, network security group, NICs, and the VMSS itself, and making sure that all the stuff is configured in a consistent way. And so the idea is to do some intelligent things with default, so that when you create a new VMSS, we create or use the network security group and set up the load balancer in a way that makes sense for the other settings that you've set. So I think Aaron's going to go into some specifics with creation scenarios, but it's the same sort of idea. The idea is that you can use one command for 85% of the scenarios that will create the VMSS that you were looking for.
Yep. Cool. So I've got a bunch of stuff that I just opened real quick. Just to kind of touch on what Mark was talking about for VMSS, we have a bunch of new docs up. Thanks to some of our partners on the Compute Docs team, you'll see their names up here at the top of the docs. They write some good stuff here. But all of these docs are updated with the new Azure VM commandlet, the new Azure VM commandlet, I guess is what I would say. So you'll notice while they pass in the names for a lot of the things that they want to create, and I can make this a little bit bigger if needed, they don't have to do all of the setup that you'll see. So there's a few docs that are still a little too complex and have a little bit more stuff going on. So if we look at this networking one, we scroll down here, this is kind of the old way, and this scenario isn't quite covered in the new experience, but you got to create certain the VM, the image, the disk, network interface, lots of times the VNet, things like that, and then end up passing it all through. Now in all of these tutorials, you'll see ways to do this kind of on a one-off. So you can create the VM, connect to it. Same thing with managed disks. They've got a good doc on managed disks. But same thing, we can use this nice new Azure MVM. And we're going to talk about as job here in a second. The tutorial for VM scale set will be coming online soon. We're hoping next week. And that's, like Mark said, taking some of the same concepts where things are easier that we've built here in the new Azure MVM commandlet, taking those concepts and applying them to new Azure MVMSS as well. Because there's a lot of similar scenarios there. There's obviously a lot of different scenarios there, but there's a lot of similar scenarios as well. So each of these docs over here, if you go to the Windows virtual machines, you'll see all of these new updated experiences. So please check them out. Let us know what you think, either by sending feedback in the product or commenting on the docs here. So I'm going to go ahead and stop presenting. David, how's it going, man? David's here too.
Thanks.
So, yeah. So David swooped in and built some AKS experiences for us. So without even describing what AKS is, I'll let you take it away. Tell us what you've done.
So I guess the idea is, why should Azure CLI be the only ones having fun with Kubernetes, right?
Yes.
So we took some inspiration from Azure CLI, and we created some Kubernetes commandlets for our managed. So this is AKS, and AKS is managed Kubernetes, where you only pay for the nodes running your application, which is really kind of cool. So you don't have to pay for your master nodes. You're paying for just the nodes that are running your application on Kubernetes. If you haven't experienced Kubernetes, it's really fun to play with. I've enjoyed it greatly, and it was a real pleasure putting it into PowerShell. So what we get out of the PowerShell commandlets is an easy way to create a Kubernetes them, all the CRUD nonsense. But then we also have the ability to start up a tunnel to your Kubernetes instances and spin up a entryway into your dashboard pretty simply. So these are preview. There's probably going to be some feedback needed, but I'm glad to introduce them to PowerShell. People start using them.
Awesome. Yeah. So when they're coming out, so Mark, they're going to be released later early next week, correct?
We're doing a bunch of validation, but they're targeted for next week.
Awesome. And how can a user install them at that point?
So they'll be like with a lot of the modules that we're releasing now. Whenever a new service comes online, we first release it as a preview on the gallery. For those of you who haven't seen it, the gallery, the PowerShell gallery, do install module. If you want to get a pre-release module, you have to include the -allow pre-release switch. And then you can get and then you can download and use a pre-release module just like another kind of module. So for this one, it'll be install module azurerm.kubernetes. So that'll give you everything you need to work with Kubernetes. And you can work with it by itself, or you can work with it in combination with the other modules. You can install Azure RM and then install Kubernetes or not. And that's kind of how all these modules are designed to be. And you'll see we actually have a few things coming out. We'll be talking about some of them in this in the stand-up where we have preview modules that after we've pushed them out and people have given us feedback on them, they'll eventually be making their way back into the stable release. So you'll get them when you do install module Azure RM. But right now just previews.
Awesome. Thanks a lot, David, as well. You have an uncanny ability to swoop in and write code in I mean, C#, but write code in an environment that you never have before. And honestly, I think it's impressive. So the other thing that I think is really cool is the AKS commandlets introduce a lot of functionality that we haven't quite done in the past, like working with your SSH keys if you have tunneling if you need to for either execing into your containers in Kubernetes or getting the dashboard through the tunnel front in Kubernetes. So just really, really excited to see some of the new cool things that have come in and kind of paved the way for a few things that Azure is doing as a whole. A lot more Kubernetes, a lot more SSHing.
Yeah, well, especially SSH. The native Windows components APIs are not great at it's not as easy to create an SSH key on Windows as it is pretty much everywhere else, unless you add a bunch of software on. So David did a lot of work there to make that seamless, and that means that people using the commandlets don't have to install a bunch of other stuff in order to get things to work. So that's a big plus for you guys.
As much as possible. I give a lot of thanks to Maddie, Mark, and Cormac for the help. And thank you. And for all the work that you guys have been doing on .NET Core and the core commandlets.
Right.
Hey guys, I'd like to make a comment before we move forward here. We have 15 live viewers. Just saying.
Whoa! How is that possible?
It's because they want to see Aaron. I mean,
yeah,
that's why
it's because of my shirt. I'm trying to be. It's because of my shirt. Okay, so next up is Maddie. Maddie is going to talk about two things that she's been working on. We talked about them a little bit in December, but Maddie, can you tell us a little bit about the delta from December in both AsJob and dynamic completers?
Yeah, sure. So the completers I talked about last time, basically, if you have a commandlet with a location parameter, you can tab through all locations that will be valid for that commandlet. And for resource groups, any commandlet with a resource group parameter, you can tap through all your resource groups in your current commandlet, or your current subscription, sorry. So the delta from last time is that they are now in every single
long running
Azure RM.
Yeah,
Those work with partial completion as well, right? So if I start typing a couple of letters and then hit tab, I can get to the resource group that starts with those letters, which is cool.
Quite. I quite agree. It could be a pain before when you had to type it out.
Yep. And then for AsJob, I think we did talk about it a little bit last time. Basically, all of our core commandlets, which is compute, key vault, network, and Azure RM storage, and resources. Now, any long-running operation in those core commandlets will have the AsJob parameter. And what that basically does is allow you to run the commandlet as a background job, as a PowerShell job, and use the PowerShell commandlets to receive information about that job. And from there, you can continue working until that job is completed.
Yeah. What was the logic that we used to decide whether a commandlet should have AsJob in it, or like as part of its parameter set or not?
So basically, any commandlet that took more than about 10 seconds, we decided that should have it, as well as any commandlet that made an asynchronous call.
Got it. Very cool. That's exciting. I don't know about you guys. I use it all the time now. I don't think I run commandlets without AsJob ever. If the commandlet supports AsJob, I use it.
I don't delete anything or create anything without using AsJob anymore.
Yeah, especially if it's a delete or create. So one of the cool things that I also tried to use it for recently is some of our netcore tests that are a little more manual at present. We made all of those jobbable and basically could convert our script from serial into a big, parallelized test file, I guess, which took those tests from like an hour and a half to 15 minutes. So very rapidly, we even can get good uses out of AsJob. So please try those things out and let us know what you think. Cool. So I don't think we have anyone from compute here. yet, or unfortunately, maybe next time. But the compute team, kind of based off of some of the work that we talked about with New Azure MVM and New Azure MVMSS, took some of that infrastructure work that we had done for those and built yet another simplified commandlet for New Azure MVM. And that's with VHD upload support. So does anyone want to take that unless you just want me to take it?
So I don't have a whole lot more to add to that. Basically, they just add a parameter that allows you to upload your own custom VM image instead of one of the canned images. So they also have a new preview module that just shipped called compute.managed service. And this is going to be a way that you can migrate VMs from other technologies into Azure. And the first thing that they ship that with is for using Hyper-V VMs. So there's like a convert to Azure RM VHD you can do with a Hyper-V VM, so the single commandlet that will then create a VHD that you can use to create VMs with. So you should look for additions to that in the future that'll take VMs from various different technologies and allow you to migrate them into Azure.
Yeah.
That should be cool.
Awesome. The next thing that we had on the list was talking about specific updates to the convenience parameter set for New Azure MVM. There's a few things. First of all, we added support for availability set there. And we also added support for like long form marketplace images, like offer : or what is it? Publisher : offer : whatever it is. There's 4 things.
Publisher : offer : image : version, I believe.
There you go, image. I missed image. I knew all the other 3. So added support for that, and then added a little bit more randomizing support for the domain name label that we create on the public IP address. This is a good opportunity, which we're going to talk about at the end, to send feedback. If you try out, our goal for New Azure MVM, as we said all along, was to cover 80% of interactive scenarios and then slowly creep that coverage up. That's kind of why we didn't start with availability sets, but we added that coverage. We didn't start with custom image marketplace images and then added that coverage. If you see something missing that you use as part of your interactive experience a lot, send us feedback. Send -feedback. I'll ask you a few questions, and then we can get good feedback on what you'd like to see change there. Next up is GeoDR, although I don't think we have anyone who has joined us. Who did the design review there? I believe that was Maddie.
I did the commandlet review, yeah.
The commandlet review. So can you give us just a short blurb? What is GeoDR?
Really?
Not really. Okay. Does anyone have a short blurb? What service is it for?
So it's for Service Bus and Event Hub.
Yeah, it's for all the Service Bus based services, I believe. So
yeah. Awesome. And I think my understanding was that it was better like geographic support for those experiences. Exactly what you can do.
Correct. I believe it's geo redundancy.
Yeah.
I believe if you go look it up on, if somebody were to go look it up on the on docs.microsoft.com, which is our awesome docs site, that they would actually get all of the details around how that works.
Yep.
And I would encourage everyone to do that.
It's Geo Disaster Recovery for Service Bus. So if you're interested in checking that out, I just did a simple query, Azure GeoDR. And so those commandlets shipped in the last release. So if you use Service Bus and you're looking for geo redundancy, then check those commandlets out. Mark, you already talked about creating a VM disk from Hyper-V with convert to Azure RM VHD. The next thing is we have now 2 confusing, what are they called? Acronyms or initializations? I guess it's technically an initialization, MSI. So this is MSI login. Mark, you're on the hook for talking about that. Yeah. What is MSI?
MSI is kind of this cool new feature. It's in preview right now. The idea is that distributing credentials out to the different places where you use them is really hard, and rotating the credentials is also really hard. So the idea is to have a completely managed identity where basically the Azure does all the hard work of managing credentials for you, and you never actually see the credentials that you're using. other than the token that gets created from them. So right now, like I said, it's in preview. What happens when there are a few services that have onboarded to this. The biggest one is VMs. So basically, when you create a VM, you can specify that you want Azure to assign an identity to that VM. What happens is it creates a service principal that's associated with that VM and creates credentials for that service principal and loads them to the VM. And then when you're on the VM, any application can actually authenticate by just making a localhost request to a particular endpoint. What we've done in PowerShell, we've added a bunch of, there's some other services like App Service, and I believe that Functions web apps are onboarding, and essentially everything, all the services are being encouraged to onboard. So over time, this will be available pretty much through all the core services. But what we've done in PowerShell is enabled you to set up MSI for those services that allow it, and then also to log in using MSI. So if you go to a VM and have the PowerShell commandlets installed, you can say connect Azure RM account -MSI, and that will log in using the credentials of using the credentials for that VM, and it will automatically try to get the proper credentials for the various things you might use, like Graph and Data Lake and Azure RM and all of that stuff. So really cool. There are a lot. MSI is a big new initiative for how to deal with credentials, and there are a bunch of
It's okay, David. It happens. I love your face, though. Sorry, Mark. Go ahead. Who muted? I think you guys are muted now.
Oh, man.
Okay, you're good now. You're good now.
You'll see a bunch of enhancements to this in the future, so stay tuned to this space.
Yeah, that's me. Awesome. Thanks, Mark.
Since I was talking about it, I can say that thanks to Kirk Monroe, who was really persistent in getting through and doing all the work so that we could change our login accounts, our login command to be connect Azure RM account. And so that's out there. It wasn't a breaking change. You can still use all the same scripts that you used before. There are aliases to all the other previous things, but by default now you use connect, which is like the standard PowerShell verb for doing login type activities. So we're super excited about that. And thanks for the contribution from Kirk. That was awesome. And you should expect to see that on NetCore in the next time we release NetCore as well.
Correct. Awesome. There's a bunch of other things. I think they're on you right now, Mark, but let's not, we're just kind of listing at this point. We have a bunch of other preview models out right now for Data Lake Store subscriptions. We have a websites preview that's out soon, right? Location-based services, and Mark, earlier you asked compute. You talked about compute.managed service earlier. So a lot of these things are, like Mark said again earlier, trying to get things out to you that are maybe not like the service team wants to get more feedback on these experiences. So if you have a chance and you use these services, if you use Data Lake Store or you use subscriptions, just look up the modules on the PowerShell gallery real quick, download them, and then you could try out those experiences and send us feedback.
And remember, to use any of the preview modules, you have to install the latest version of PowerShell Get. So I think if you're totally up to date on your Windows with all of your updates, that you might already have it. If you have the latest version of Windows 10, but if not, you can just do update module PowerShell Get, and then you'll have the latest version of PowerShell Get that will support preview modules.
Awesome. Okay, one more item for me on Shipped. We had a lot of customer feedback for the NetCore versions of the modules. We'll probably more and more start referring to these modules as Azure PowerShell Core. As we've discussed before, the plan is to bring 100% coverage to Azure PowerShell Core before build, and then post build we plan on kind of making the core version of the modules the only version of the modules, so that same DLLs work on desktop and any core scenarios such as Linux, anything like that. Again, that kind of dropping the old ones and going full core, that's post-build. But we just released late last week, I believe, the Azure PowerShell core commandlets. We added key vault improvements and then a bunch of other fixes that we had long discussions on in GitHub. So fixes and key vault commandlets are now in Azure PowerShell core. Like I said, send us feedback if you notice something, file issues on GitHub if you notice something. I'm not going to do a demo just because not a lot has changed other than just we're going to start pounding through the modules and enabling them in Azure PowerShell core. As always, I always do a quick call out to the Docker images. We have Docker images for both Azure PowerShell core and Azure PowerShell on the Docker Hub. So just check those out. They're under Azure SDK, or if you search for them on Docker, you'll find them as well. So word of warning, the Windows images are huge because Windows images.
Windows containers are huge.
Because, yeah. So, however, they are getting smaller. So the base image that we use is compressed, I believe, 5 gigabytes. There is a 1709 base image that is 3 gigabytes. And then there is a Windows vNext image that is, it's under Windows Server Core -Insider. That is 2 gigabytes. So we build against the older ones so that it works on more Windows container platforms. But if you are using one of these later, if you have an insider build of Windows and you want to try out the smaller images, you can do that. Okay, now we're on to the future. Scott, yes, go ahead.
Caution about the core modules. Not caution, just something that's a little different. The authentication scenarios are slightly different for PowerShell core. So, and these just have to do with what Active Directory is supporting going forward. So one thing you'll notice that's missing is username plus password credentials. So you can't pass it a credential with username plus password and have that work on,
this is actually
PowerShell
a
core.
good thing.
Yes.
This is a great thing for security, but it's not awesome for people's scripts because they have to change them.
Yeah.
However, this is a change for scripts.
We should not be doing this.
the other thing is that we have we've moved away from having interactive login. So it used to be you type connect Azure RM account and you get a dialog pop up on the desktop. You still get that, but in Net Core, what you get is device login, and what you have to do is open up a browser and paste a code into the go to URI, paste a code in that identifies your session.
Can you guys move the camera at all?
Yeah, no, I'm just a disembodied voice. So it's a little bit different, and just expect that to be a little bit different. The one other thing that I want to talk about is because of that, when you're using device auth, one of the things that we get is long-lived tokens, and so using context autosave will really help out. Basically, if you use the thing a few times a week, you should only have to log in once every few months.
Yeah.
And so that's really where we're going. The idea is that this device auth login plays a lot better with sort of terminal kinds of, if I'm doing like a remote PowerShell into something, or otherwise working through a terminal. I don't have to be able to pop up a browser on the machine. I can do it locally and still be able to log in. So, and
this is consistent across Azure CLI as well. This is the same method we've been using in Azure CLI for some time. Thanks a lot, Cormac.
Cormac is our awesome
cameraman. He's the cameraman. Sorry, what were you saying, David?
What I was saying is this is consistent across Azure CLI as well. We've been using that same thing. Island. It's a pretty good experience, particularly for the areas that Mark has pointed out. Doing this remotely in the machines and hoping that you're going to have access to some popped up UI is often fruitless.
Correct. Yep. So that's it. Those are good words of not caution, but just differences in the NetCore modules. Okay, we're on Scott's item. Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, and please send feedback. You can send feedback from the core version, So please, if you really want that dialogue pod, please send feedback to us on that. Or if you like the new experience, please send feedback on that. Just you can send feedback from your Mac, you can send feedback from your Linux box, you can send feedback from your Windows box. It all works.
It all works. And so Scott is up. We're on our section of future things that we're working on. I put Scott on the spot for this one because he loves to talk about send feedback. But one of the first things that we're looking at is
other people have talked about it, because that's the only reason I come here is to say send feedback or tweet Aaron.
Yeah. Yeah, tweet. I bet some of our viewers have been at my talks at Build or Ignite or something like that. And as Cormac knows, Cormac was at one of my talks last year. The first thing one of the last things I tell people is to follow me on Twitter, because I'm so Twitter famous. I have about 110 followers.
Wow.
So it's a lot. I've heard that's a lot.
By the end of next week.
Yeah, I've heard that's a lot. Cool. So the thing, send feedback. We also have some Key Vault improvements coming. Maddie is going to be. Do you want to talk about it, Mark or Scott, or do you want Maddie? So Maddie's still kind of just getting ramped up on it, but the general idea is to improve some of the usability, and then to also improve some advanced scenarios. We're currently talking with the Key Vault team. This is yet another reason to send feedback. If you have Key Vault scenarios that you wish were easier, let us know. Maybe you constantly download a secret and then upload to app service environment variable, or you add a secret you use AKS and you add a secret using kube control to your AKS. Like, what types of experiences using Key Vault, or what kind of scenarios do you use that you wish were easier, or that you wish didn't have to go through your machine? Send us that feedback. We're kind of ramping up there. Maddie has already done some initial work on what might change in terms of usability. Maddie, do you have any comments there?
Not too much. Mostly the work I've been looking at is improving the parameter sets, making sure everything makes logical sense.
Making sure you can pipe.
Adding piping. That makes sense. And I'm also looking at adding like a file provider, but that's long future probably.
Yeah, that's probably looking more like May timeframe.
Far future.
Far future. So a couple things I want to add here is we specifically said for Key Vault and some other things, but also if there are areas that you think we should focus on, right? We did VMs, we're in the web apps, Kubes, Key Vault. We have an idea of what's going to happen over the next several sprints through build, but that doesn't mean we can't reprioritize. If you scream and yell loud enough, nicely at Aaron's Twitter account, we will take all this into consideration. So not just areas to focus on, but specific scenarios would be very useful. And then, of course, everything that's out in the wild, especially these new scenarios. Let us know how they work for you, and if there are other things we want to do. We're not looking to add these high-level, user-friendly type things across an entire RP or something. We're going for the mainstream 80%. And we're going to stop there unless we get feedback that says go add a little bit more.
Yeah. That's a really good point. That's kind of like sorry, go ahead.
Just so we can go on to other things so yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. That's kind of like I mentioned earlier with the VM commandlets. We kind of wanted to go for that first 80%, got a little bit of feedback on, you could get to 95 pretty quickly by doing these three things. So we went ahead and did those three things. So definitely give us feedback on if there's not enough coverage somewhere, or if you want to see new scenarios. The next item was the new Azure RM Web App GA. I don't think we have to say much about that. Our next release is snapped on 2/23, I believe, which means we'll go out the door 2/27. So the preview version of the new Azure RM Web App commandlet that you've seen since about December will be going GA in the next release. I have down for David and me to talk about the AKS GA. That's going out, like David said, we're going out in preview within the next week or so. And then we're probably targeting GA sometime in March. So again, send us feedback. Let us know what the gaps are there. David's done an excellent job of closing pretty much, making it almost as the exact same experience as the CLI. But we'd love to hear, what scenarios you'd like to see improved in some of these new commandlets like AKS. Okay, Cormac, it's your time to shine. Cameraman to yourself.
There we go.
No. You got a cameraman to yourself.
You want me to? I'm putting it just on me though.
Yeah. Okay. Yes.
Be in the gallery.
Okay. So.
Also, not the subtle T-shirt.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, nice. Nice. That is fantastic. We need a PS Seahawks. Right. Okay. So this is a good one, Cormac. You get probably one of our most fascinating future changes in terms of, moving to the future, I guess you could say. What's up with PowerShell 3 and 4?
So in the last release, 5.3.0, we put out a bunch of deprecation warnings for users that are still using PowerShell 3 and 4. Saying that in the near future, which I believe that's probably going to be near build in that time frame, May-ish, we're going to be dropping support of any PowerShell version that is under 5.0. So mainly PowerShell 3 and 4, or anyone on those versions of PowerShell are not going to be able to use the new Azure RM modules moving forward. And this is just so that we're tightening what versions that we need to support for Azure RM. And it lets us enable a couple of features that we've had to work around for because they weren't supported in 3 and 4 in easier ways or weren't supported at all. So this will allow us to enable new features, get rid of our workarounds for the lack of support of these features in 3 and 4. Stuff like completers is a little difficult in 3 and 4, so we had to do a couple things around that. But that will help us tighten ship and get be more consistent with what we're doing.
And it's also it's also bound up with the having a single version. Yeah, camera panning's awesome. It's also bound up with having a single version that we use for both Netcore and desktop. In order for basically the PowerShell teams providing a library that's backward compatible to 5.x. And so in order for us to support one version on desktop, we have to drop support for 3 and 4 as well. Yep. And it's time. It's time. 3 and 4 are great, but everybody should be on 5.1 or 6 at least.
Yes, 6 is cool too. 6 is.
I have another comment since we're going out the corner here. I just want the world to know that yes, Aaron actually wears that shirt every single day, not just for community standards.
That's true. This is true. I wore it yesterday, and I'm 90% sure I wore it the day before. But what's funny is I wash it every night. It's like it can only be one. I can't have multiple.
Well, that's what makes it not horrific. That's why
it's horrific.
This used to be red. Okay, and then the last item we have here coming in the future, the different initialization of MSI. Cormac, what is improved MSI?
So while we want everyone to get their bits for Azure RM from the PowerShell gallery, there are alternative ways to download and install our modules. One being the web platform installer on Windows, which allows you to go through like a gallery of products from Microsoft, and ours, Microsoft Azure PowerShell is on there, and that will download and install the Azure RM bits for you on your box. But one drawback of that is that it downloads it to a different location than you would see if you were installing from the PowerShell gallery, and so that can cause some confusion with users and has caused problems in the past when you have installed from the gallery and you installed from the MSI. So what we're doing moving forward, either this release coming up or the next one, we're going to change how the MSI is built so that it is going to look like whenever you install the MSI, it's going to look like that you installed the bits from PowerShell gallery. So you've got one uniform location now for all Azure RM modules. And then we're hoping that will also take care of the update scenario so that you can install using the MSI, and then if you just want to get the latest, you don't have to go reinstall a new MSI. You can just run update module, and it'll already know that, or think that it came from the gallery, and it'll just install from the gallery. And that way you don't have to install this huge MSI every time, and you're just updating modules that change from release to release.
Awesome.
No more changes to PS module path.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the last item I have is send feedback, if we haven't made that clear enough. Especially for, we have 11 people viewing, 12 people viewing right now. I think we got up to 19. Go ahead and open up PowerShell right now, type send feedback, and send us a piece of feedback.
Chat message here.
What do you say?
Enter chat message or link here.
Yes,
That's the old school send feedback.
Yeah, they're here. Why don't I just type?
Does that work? Does this chat box have? Wait, does that work?
That's just ours. We're selfish. We don't care.
You can send it from your Mac. You can send it on your Mac. You can send it here or there. You can send it anywhere.
Okay, now we have to end community stand-up with Dr. Seuss every month from now on.
Yeah, Mark, you are now. You must write a poem in Seussisms for every community stand-up. Yeah, so send feedback. If you're watching right now or you're watching on YouTube, just crack open your PowerShell terminal real quick and send us feedback. We'd love to hear from you. And hopefully something that you suggest you'll see in the next community stand-up, or the next one is something we either shipped or plan on shipping in the future. So does anyone have anything else before we part for the day? Awesome. I really appreciate all of the live viewers. It makes me feel good. And then tell your friends to join next time. Thanks a lot, everyone. Have a good one.